Again, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Trisha Dugan. I'm a recruiting specialist out of our New York office. Thank you for joining us for our first spring webinar, Consulting 101. Before we jump in, I just want to go over a few logistics for the webinar tonight. We want to make this as interactive as possible and answer as many of your questions. So please make sure that you are submitting your questions through the Q&A feature, which is at the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. All your questions could go to Caroline Viola. She is also on the line too, and she is the host of this event. If we don't get to your questions by the end of this webinar tonight, please send them to Carney's Careers .mba@carney.com, and we'll make sure to answer them there. So without further ado, I'm actually going to pass it over to our panelists tonight to kick us off and get us started here.
Great. Hi, everyone. So what we're going to do is just briefly give a quick introduction and then dive a little bit deeper into our backgrounds in the next slide. So, I'm Melissa Bolsler. I'm a general practice consultant currently aligned with our San Francisco office. And previously, I've also been aligned with our Chicago office as well. But yeah, looking forward to this event and sharing some of my experiences with you.
Well, my name is Gabe Aitrola, and I'm a manager in our health practice. I'm aligned to our Chicago office, and I've been with the firm for about 4 years now.
Hi, everyone. My name is Crystal Chalk. I'm an associate out of our New York office, and I've joined the firm a little over 6 months ago. I haven't aligned to a practice yet, but aiming on aligning to our consumer practice.
Thanks, everyone, for your introductions. We're now going to a little bit more background about your presenters this evening. So Melissa, I'll pass it back over to you.
Thanks. So I'll start from my educational background. I went to the University of Michigan where I received my bachelor and a master's in engineering. And it was there after that that I joined Carney back in 2015 as a business analyst. And that's when I was aligned with our Chicago office. So after 3 years there, I eventually made it to associate and decided to use one of the many firm benefits, which is our sponsored MBA program. And I went to the University of Chicago. So for the past 2 years, I just graduated in June 2020. I was at Booth getting my MBA, and then post MBA, I rejoined the firm as an associate just this past October. And I think my decision to rejoin ties a little bit to the why consulting on the bottom that you see below. In my years at Carney, I truly experienced some incredible growth and learning opportunities. If I looked at myself back in 2015, I feel like I'm a wholly different person, especially in terms of business knowledge and honestly, like a lot of soft skills as well. I was given responsibilities that I otherwise wouldn't have gotten. And, I've been supported by a culture of apprenticeship, mentorship, and learning, kind of surrounded by people that help support that. The second bullet, every day, and at least project to project, is pretty new. You jump into a project, you learn a new industry, you learn a new problem to solve or method to tackle things, and it's always interesting. Yet, over the past 5 to 6 years, have I ever done something that is the same? So there's always something exciting that is new to tackle. And last, of course, maybe this should be first, but the teams that I've worked with have just been beyond great. I miss them a lot, actually, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing them again. And virtual is better than nothing, but can't wait to be in the team room with everyone again.
Awesome. Yeah, so to follow up on Melissa, I actually did the inverse. So I went to University of Chicago for undergrad, and then to Michigan for my MBA. And I graduated from Michigan with my MBA in 2017. And before I was in, so I joined Carney straight out of business school. Before that, I was in high frequency trading, which is very interesting but niche kind of profession in place. So I think part of that ties to also for me why consulting. That I think consulting gives a great opportunity to explore different kinds of industries, which I've had the opportunity to do so. So health, consumer, hospitality, retail, and then a couple other here or there like industrials. But I also think functionally the focus. So I've been fortunate enough to do projects including post-merger integrations, due diligence, supply chain optimization, organization design, operating model, you kind of name it. So I think my experience at Carney has been pretty diverse in a lot of ways, and that's really exciting and has really achieved the goal that I set out when I went to business school, which was to kind of pivot away from being this pigeonholed high frequency trader who's only going to be a trader to someone who can do a lot of different things. And then I think the other part that's really exciting and fun is, like Melissa talked about, the teams, and the people on the teams are, incredibly smart, um, incredibly, just able to deliver on these complex and challenging problems for clients that you can't typically do or see like it within industry. So I think the pace and the complexity of work that we're going through and how we tackle it, it's hard to find it in many places. There's certainly some industries or services where you have that caliber of talent and teamwork, but I think consulting is, it brings together that rare combination of those things. And then the last thing I'll just say, on a personal note, I like, being active, so snowboarding, soccer, being outdoors, and then, a bit of a sneaker collector, so I like shoes and probably rivaling my wife now in terms of how many shoes I have. So
Thanks, Gabe. Um, so I'll start with my background as well. I actually went to Duke undergrad. I have a Bachelor of Arts from Duke in psychology. And then I worked at the NBA, so in sports, for 6 years before deciding to go to business school. And the main impetus there was to actually just future-proof my career. And I think that's something that started in business school, but is definitely solidified by going into consulting. So that's a huge part of why consulting for me. I think the breadth of exposure that we get to different business problems and industries, as you've already heard, is really important. And helping to figure out where it is that I do want to specialize, right? So you don't know what you don't know. And having worked at one company before, consulting is really a way for me to figure out where I get my most energy from and problems that I specifically like to solve. So I think for any of you that are unsure about what you want to do, consulting is a perfect career to figure that out and create that path. I also, having only worked at one company, really wanted to make sure that I was honing skills across a number of different frameworks. And again, already in just my 6 months at the firm, I've been able to really ramp up on a number of skills, whether that's in analysis, PowerPoint creation, how I communicate to clients. And so for those two reasons, I think consulting is a great way to make sure that you're ramped up and have fully developed any skills that you still have to check the boxes on. So those are my two big reasons. And then on the personal side, I love to bake and watch a lot of HGTV. So if anyone wants to discuss any of what I said, happy to connect and reach out. So I can quickly talk about what it means to be a consultant. I think we've all alluded to it already, but it's a lot about working in teams. So really picking a really strong team to bring a diverse set of ideas together and making sure that collectively we can address client issues. Mostly when they bring consultants in, it's because a problem is too difficult or too complex to handle in-house. So how do we make sure that we're leveraging the full scope of what the firm has to offer to bring the best result for the client? I think normally we think about problems within like a limited kind of purview, but often projects intersect across industries and services. So it might start off as, just digital transformation, and then we bring in another team, a supply chain team or procurement team to really solve that problem. So consistently working in cross-functional groups to bring the best solutions. And then I also want to bring up that no, you don't need to be an expert on everything that you work on. Often, projects have, you can go into a project not knowing much about that specific industry or a specific vertical or service line. And then over time, you develop those skills and leverage the experts that we already have in the firm. So being a consultant is about being flexible and having kind of that curiosity and drive to learn more than having the hard skills across every industry or every service. And yeah, so some of the problems that we solve and the people that we get exposure to, you won't see in most other fields. So that's something that also gives me energy. Today, we're talking to senior leaders within a health firm, within a health company, and really hearing what their needs are. So it's a great way to get that client exposure, to accelerate your career and get exposure to what's happening at these firms at the highest level. So something else I've enjoyed over my time. So here's just a quick snapshot of what Carney offers, both in terms of industries and service lines. And as a generalist, you can be staffed across any of these areas. So that gives you, again, the exposure to test out where you fit best, to learn from different industry leaders, to get that exposure from different partners, which has actually been one of my highlights of the firm. So I've never done anything in digital transformation before joining the firm, and now I have a number of partners within that practice that I have close relationships with just off of one project, right? And the same across consumer and retail. So it's a great way to learn a lot in a short amount of time, and really figure out which services or industries most interest you.
Great, thanks, Crystal. So what we want to talk about a little bit is what does an associate's experience look like on some of these projects? And Gabe and I are each going to walk through one of the cases that we've gone through, and we tried to pick something that's quite a bit different from each other to explain the scope of different projects you can get, but this is only a sampling at the end of the day. So one I want to talk about is an organization transformation that we did for a health client. And the scope of the project was a new role design strategy for the future of store teams. So what that's saying is basically in the store, what do the roles look like? What are their responsibilities? What benefits do they have? And what's cool about this is something that Crystal was alluding to is that we had two partners on the project, one that's associated with the health practice and one that's associated with our service practice of leadership, change, and organization. So basically, they came each with their own specific sets of knowledge and used them together in order to do the best for the client. So the intent here was to look at the store labor model and help design the future roles of leadership in the stores. And as an associate, the role was to help conduct the baseline assessment of pain points that the employees had. So what we did is developed and sent out an activity survey to all of the stores, and we got a sampling of people that were able to fill it out that highlighted some of, the desires and the pain points of each role. And, this was a very quantitative look at, if you can imagine sending out some like broad surveys, they have to be pretty short in order to actually get some good data and to have people fill it out. So with that, we did a lot of store visits as a team, partner with the client to get some qualitative looks on what's going on in the store. So we matched the quantitative with the qualitative to help form like a large opinion as to what's going on in the field. So after that, the associate role basically would be creating a workshopping document saying, okay, here's all the pain points. Here's what we're hearing from the stores. Let's start to put together a perspective of what the future role should look like. So they'd help put together this document to lead the client and the Carney team together in a workshopping exercise to help design the future of these roles. So then the output of these workshops, and it's never just one, it's usually like an iterative measure that we do with the client team, but the output would be the future roles that they're going to design. So by the end of the series, you would have a good idea of what that would be. And then from there, okay, so we have a good idea of what the role would be, and then the associate would basically be working with the client team to help design the pieces. So, for this role, this is what their responsibilities are going to be, and asking questions like, okay, what's the career path for this person? And what should their compensation be? What does the training program look like? If they're going to be a new leader of the store, they obviously need to know how to lead people. So how do we get that into their day-to-day training? So all of which kind of have their own series of workshops and discussions and output. So this is a very collaborative exercise that we did with the client. Very fun, a great experience overall.
Awesome. Thanks, Melissa. So to give a sort of a different view of a project that's quite a bit different. So talking about a little bit in terms of an operational due diligence. So just to set some of the context, the team that we had on this one was a partner, a principal, a manager, and associate. So pretty lean team. And in this case, like most diligence, a very short time frame, so 4 weeks. And Carney was brought in by the PE firm to help address an unexpected gap in sales for one of their portfolio companies. And the timing was important because the PE firm was going to bring this company to market and look for potential bidders. So they wanted to transact out of holding this portfolio company. And so, again, very short timeline. In this instance, for my first time, working on a diligence, which like others have talked about, there's that ramp, but there's always the expertise from, the senior folks, whether it's the partner, the principal, or even the manager to kind of help guide, if you're new to it, or there are SMEs across the firm. But in this instance, over 4 weeks, the right Carney experts were on the case with myself. So the role of the associate was really to, one, help build the financial model. So, because it's 4 weeks and you have to come out with results pretty quickly, you start to do a lot of things in parallel. And one of those things is building the model, but then also starting to do the diligence to say, okay, if we need to address this top line gap and it's not going to be filled by finding a new customer in a short amount of time, how can we do that operationally? So this was a unique combination of, a bit of a due diligence in the private equity part of the world combined with, Carney's strength in a lot of ways in operations. So, figuring out, okay, let's take a look at their production process today. Where are they not fully optimized? How can they optimize or find opportunities to do so in the near future so that when this portfolio company is brought to market, there's a clear path to resolution to address that gap, which would, if it wasn't filled or there wasn't a way to get there, would impact the eventual sales price. So again, what was great about the situation and can be the case on a diligence or even other areas is, as an associate, not only are you building out the model and getting your hands in the details, but you're also engaging with pretty senior people in the portfolio company. So on a daily basis, talking to the COO, the CFO, and then in this case, once a week reporting out to the CEO. And very small, intimate kind of report outs, making sure that the leadership team is following closely and aligned, which is great exposure. And I would say in terms of the outcome, what was also cool about this is that the relationships built out with those senior folks. They asked for this particular Carney team to come back again for future work, whether it was related to whoever their next owner is or just within the company's own kind of world as they continue to operate its portfolio company. So high pace, but that's how diligence typically are, and a cool peek into the private equity world and working closely with leadership at a company.
Great. Thank you all for that information and for explaining a little bit about what an associate does and also what consulting is. We want to leave the rest of the time we have here tonight to answer your questions. We know that you are headed into your MBA programs, but you might not know who Carney is. You might not know what consulting really was before this call either. So everything and anything that we could answer, we are happy to. Again, put your questions in the Q&A pod here on the screen. But we do have a number of questions coming in right now. So we're going to go ahead and get started with our first question. So this question is for you, Gabe. What was the biggest challenge you had to overcome your first year at the firm?
So I'd say one of the biggest challenges was actually working with PowerPoint for sure. But assuming that PowerPoint is something you're familiar with, I would say, from a consulting perspective, I think I wasn't used to ramping up on something so quickly that I didn't know much about. I'm in the health practice now, and I had an interest in health when I was at business school, but I hadn't worked in health before. And my second project was a post-merger integration with a retail health company. And I didn't know the first thing about like how it actually worked on the back end. So I think getting comfortable with knowing that you won't know a lot to start, and that you're going to be kind of, it's kind of cliche, but you're drinking from the fire hose. There's a lot of information coming really fast, and it's okay that you don't pick it all up. Like being comfortable with that is something that I think some people have to learn, including myself. So that was probably the biggest challenge. And then even if you've done it a couple times, you sometimes forget. And so going through that process again is something that could happen many times throughout your career until you kind of become more specialized and an expert in an area. But that was probably my biggest challenge.
Thanks, Gabe. I'm going to direct the next question to Melissa. Can you talk a little bit about the staffing model at Kearney? What does it look like? Do you work with teams where people are in a certain office, or do you work across offices?
Yeah, definitely. So our staffing model at Carney would be called a national staffing model. And effectively there's a team of staffing managers, and everybody will be assigned one of them. And they work together to help make sure that the projects are staffed up properly. Now, it doesn't really matter what office you're a part of. You can be staffed on any project across the US. So, my first week at the firm, I sat down with my staffing manager and talked to her a little bit about what I'm really interested in, what my goals were, where I wanted to develop the most. And what she did is kind of help figure out projects that fit those pieces. So honestly, I think I was in Chicago, and it's a pretty big office, but for the first year, I had yet to interact with anybody on any of my project teams that was part of the Chicago office, which was pretty crazy. But one of my favorite parts about that is that whenever I visited other offices, so for instance, I visited New York for a weekend and went to the office on a Friday, I knew a bunch of people that were there. So, you jump around offices and still kind of feel like you're a part of the firm in all of these cities, which is really great. But yeah, at a high level, to answer the question, it's a national staffing model, and you can get staffed with people across all offices, and it doesn't really matter for your staffing preferences, at least, what office you're aligned to.
Great. Thank you so much, Melissa. This next question I'm going to pass over to Crystal. Do you have any advice on navigating the Carney recruitment process? And also, if there was any 2 to 3 things that you think that you could have done before you started your actual MBA. So it's a bit of a 2-part thing, a little bit about the interview process and just a little bit about prepping to, start your MBA.
Sure. So I remember clearly deciding on consulting and picking up my first consulting books. I think the time before business school, when things get crazy, is a great time to at least do some preliminary prep. So while you're in business school, you'll be able to join, your consulting clubs and pair up and do prep. But I think grounding myself before was really helpful. So if you do have some gaps in, maybe your mental math or how you structure problems, you can already start to address those on your own. So a hack that I've done and I usually suggest to others is using just YouTube videos that you see online of different casing. That way, before, if you need to practice before you're in front of other people, it's a very low risk environment to play, a case video, pause it, see how you would respond to that, and then play it and see what the experts are, or whatever that source is, how they would handle a problem. So I think that those are some low risk things that you can do before, just to prep for the process. To speak more about the process in general, I think it's a good mix of casing, but also fit and doing some research on why Carney to make sure that you're clear on what those distinguishing features are per consulting firm. So for me, I attended quite a few of the events like this to really learn about what makes each firm unique. So I think one, going to the recruiting events is really important. And then two, connecting with the consultants that you meet. I think they provided a lot of color about what the experience would look like. And that was something I really wanted to know and didn't want to be shocked on the job, right? So we all have a lot of great stories about our project so far and happy to share them. So just reach out. Within your business school, there'll be alumni. So I would definitely suggest connecting with them, and you can start doing that even before you get on campus. So those are a few of my, quick references and things that I did to prepare.
Awesome. Thank you, Crystal. This next question I'm going to give to Gabe. So at what stage did you or consultants expect to shift from being a generalist to specializing in a particular industry?
Yeah, so it's changed a little bit over time that I've been here, but I think, what's kind of nice about the evolution at Carney is that the expectation is pretty wide now, and you can kind of choose your own adventure. So, folks that may join the firm and know right away what they want to do, now they can align much earlier. That wasn't the case before. So I think that's great if you're very clear on what you want to do. Some people want to explore a little bit, leverage the opportunity to be a generalist and kind of try different things, which is one of the most, I think, powerful things of consulting. And so, truthfully, I don't know the exact formal time you're supposed to align, but, I believe it might be principal. So from associate to manager, that can be for maybe 5 years. So there's time to align, but I'd say on average, people probably align around when they're becoming manager or so. So maybe a couple of years in, give or take. But there's a lot of flexibility, which is great.
Great, thanks, Gabe. I'm going to actually ask this to all of you, and you can choose who wants to answer. But in regards to tips on career switches during, getting your MBA, so the firm does look at candidates that maybe don't have previous consulting experience. What do you think the firm is looking for in those candidates that might not come from a traditional background?
So I guess what's interesting, I think I didn't necessarily, I was always in consulting, but I worked with plenty of people who came from non-traditional backgrounds, and I don't really know if that's even something that we need to say, because so many people come from so many different backgrounds, and that's like what one of the cool parts about consulting is as well, right? So, I especially love when I work on projects with people who are really smart in a certain area. I've worked a lot on projects in logistics and operations for some companies, and I felt like, one, I was able to learn a lot from them to get a lot smarter in these areas than, something that I would be able to provide to someone else, because I don't necessarily have any industry or functional experience. And then the second thing is that we're actually able to provide the client with a much smarter view on the problem, because the people that I worked with actually have some really great industry experience in some of these problems. So, I mean, I walked into consulting with like absolutely no industry or business exposure in that sense. And I think it would be really cool to apply that lens to some of these problems, because you can, tackle all sorts of different problems with different lenses. And that's a huge benefit from working with teams of people from diverse and different backgrounds.
I can then go ahead and also just chime in very quickly. I think having come from a merchandising background and I guess more non-traditional, I think what people are looking for within the firm is the ability to learn and pick up on things quickly. So it doesn't mean that you need to have like an expertise in something, but the ability to kind of understand a problem, structure out a solution, and then collaborate with others. So less about the specific what and more about the how of solving problems and contributing to teams.
Great, thank you both. This next question is actually around our diversity network. So maybe some of you know that we actually have quite a few diversity networks at Kearney, but I'm going to direct this one to Crystal. How has your involvement in the diversity network at Kearney benefited your career so far?
Sure. So I'll actually start. It's benefited my personal life. While we're in quarantine, I've actually just drawn a lot of like energy and fun from the network. And so just from, a life perspective, I've never laughed as hard as I have on some of our Black at Carney events at any other company. So I think one, just building a network of like-minded people has been really useful and really helpful, especially in these strange times. So besides that, professionally, I think mentorship is huge within our diversity networks. So I have a formal mentor. You all get assigned a formal mentor when you join the firm, but then over time, they'll begin to build that informal network. And the firm has been the diversity network has been a great starting place for that. So I'll have different members, chime in and say, oh, why don't you reach out to X partner or X principal based on your interests? And so it can be a great way to build your network. And then if they hear about a project that might interest you or aligns with something that you've worked on previously, they may be the first ones to hear about it and can reach out and drop your name, for that first conversation. So it's definitely been a benefit in terms of learning about opportunities within the firm and also creating that connection with mentorship. And then I think another aspect that I've really enjoyed from the network has been helping to plan events and attending them as well. But really having the leverage, being that, we're still small enough where everyone can still have impact. Having the leverage to say, hey, this is an event I would love to see. This is something as a firm we should focus on. Why don't we raise this and create a firm-wide event? Or, why don't we start X initiative? And that's something that even in my short time here, I was able to help out on for Black History Month and similar diversity events. So I think that that's something unique about the size of the firm that gives you the flexibility to really be impactful early. And then really, a group of that for those first people that are there to help guide you and direct you to other people within the firm to build your network. So it's been a great experience so far.
Great, thank you, Crystal. I'm going to open this up to everybody for this question, and I know it's on a lot of people's minds as well. But can you talk about how COVID has changed your everyday life as a consultant, and a little bit this year, and what you're doing a little bit differently?
I can start. I don't think this is unique to consulting. Well, I'll try and keep it like consulting centric, but I think we interact with clients so much that it's kind of changed how we view that. So I think a lot of time is required to kind of build those relationships digitally, via, WebEx or Teams or whatever it might be, or Zoom. Um, so just kind of like learning how to handle social situations like that and cues and managing what you can, and making those relationships stronger, and kind of carrying them forward despite the circumstances. And I think part of that is being able to relate, with them, that we're all kind of in a similar situation with COVID. But there's other creative things that we thought about doing, and to try and make that better. So, for example, we did a team event that was a wine tasting event, and invited some of our key clients to join us, which was a way to be social, um, while still digital, and kind of build those relationships, and kind of push a little bit further forward. So I think COVID, from a consulting perspective, has forced us to be a bit more creative, um, when we're working with our clients. But I think from a personal note, certainly probably with like many jobs, finding the right like boundaries, and ways to kind of still have your personal time, or an opportunity to do like an at-home workout or something like that. And I think people on the teams that I've been working with have been really good about trying to set structures and formality to that kind of situation, so that they recognize that everyone's got their own sort of struggles or at home difficulties. Maybe you have kids, maybe you're used to working out every day at a gym, but you can't do that anymore. So I think creative ways to kind of make sure it's sustainable internally as a team too, and there's been a lot of support from the leadership on that.
Great. Anything else to add, Crystal or Melissa?
Just this is one small thing, but I think what's been kind of nice is we've learned to adopt a lot of digital tools to, I think, at the end of the day, make our jobs a little bit easier and more efficient. And it might have been a little bit painful in the beginning, but I'm finding the co-collaboration that I'm having with some of my team and even partners and principals is a lot more smooth and transparent than it used to be. In some areas, I think some of it's a little bit more difficult to relay communication online, but maybe, once we eventually can see each other in person and still utilize these tools, I'm excited to see what that future might look like.
Great, thank you. I'm going to ask just, I think, maybe 2 more questions here. This one I will give to Gabe. How often do consultants work on projects? Kind of what's the length of typical length of a project look like?
I can give my perspective and my experience, and probably what I think is average. But I'd say probably 90% of the time, like I'm working. I've been on projects at the firm. That's probably a bit more than normal, and that means like client engagement work. However, consultants usually have a mix, and it's probably closer to like 75-80% of the time of client project work, and then the rest is business development. So could be responding to proposals, developing perspectives for the firm. So what's Carney's thinking on the most important trends in supply chain or healthcare or something like that. And then there's also other like side projects, whether they're internal or for certain situations that are not connected necessarily to client engagement. But I'd say it's kind of a mix of those things. And part of it's circumstantial. Everyone's journey is different. A lot of it's depending on when you finish a given project. Is there one that's the right fit for you, and the team needs someone at your level with your expertise, and you're interested, so you go right on to the next one. Or there's a little bit of gap in time between those things, and so there's ebbs and flows for sure. But I'd say it ranges. But I've probably been staffed most of my time on projects, and then the typical duration for projects. That can heavily vary. So if you're like the private equity practice, if you're doing a ton of due diligence, then you're going to be on very short projects. But then the flip side of that is M&A can be a long, could be a year plus. But I'd say on average, projects are usually like 2, 3, maybe 4 months. And a nice thing too is when you're navigating your career, being able to find those different lengths in projects, because it usually means different kinds and different things. So it's good to experience the short, higher burn ones, and the longer ones, which have, require different skills and build great experience.
Great. Thanks, Gabe. So I'm going to wrap it up here with one last question, but want to make sure all the panelists get to answer it. So we got this question a few times in some different ways, but what sets Carney apart as a consulting firm, and why did you choose to join Carney?
I'll start. So back when I was starting to recruit for consulting and didn't really know what it was, I knew two people that had gone to Kearney that were a year above me in school. And, I thought they were really great people, kind of respected them a lot, and just talked to them a bit about their experience. And both of them were super instrumental in like getting me to recruit for consulting generally. So I think then I just started to talk to more people at the firm, and I realized that a lot of them were similar to these two people that I did have like a lot of respect for. And they were people that I knew I wanted to work with. So as I went through the recruiting process, I think that I connected with a lot of the people throughout, both my interviewers, people at like the webinars and the events beforehand where I got to know people a little bit more. And it felt pretty natural to eventually end up at this company. Now, since then, I think I touched on this a little bit, but the size of the firm, it just feels very comfortable to me. I had worked comfortable in the sense that I like it. I had worked at 2 internships for like very large companies, and it felt like you were kind of lost in the flow of things. And this company, it's a big enough size where you can get a great breadth of different problems to work on, but it's small enough where I can hop into any office around the country and know people there. Or, if I meet somebody new, I'm sure we have like 1 degree of separation from somebody else that I know really well. So being able to connect with people across the firm and even like to be able to hop around to different types of projects. Like for instance, if I'm on health right now and I really wanted to work in energy, there's probably somebody I know on my project that could connect me with someone in the energy practice and vouch for me to be on one of those projects in the future. So I think there's like a really great culture within the firm, and I love the size so that I actually can feel like a unique individual within the firm rather than just like another consultant.
I'll actually echo that. That was one of my main considerations when joining the firm. I think also with the size, you have kind of a more personal touch and connection, and it makes the firm a bit flatter. So just the way that I've already communicated with partners during my internship, especially having your voice heard in rooms and not being drowned out because you might be an intern or an associate. And I think that speaks to the size of the firm and the culture that comes with that. So that was a big aspect for me. And I think also the importance of, I guess, like focus on my own individual career development, and feeling that this firm really supported my direction and really put in the effort to say, okay, on each project, what skills are you learning? Where do you want to go next? And really has taken kind of a tailored approach to outlining my career. And that's something that I'm not sure happens to that level at firms that are larger. So definitely echo the size and how we have the flexibility to have that breadth of projects, but also a catered approach to our professional development. I will also say I really was drawn to the national staffing model as well. So it gives you the opportunity to flex, hopefully when things go back to normal, between traveling and being on projects that are more local. So really, the firm is really focused on bringing together the team that's going to be best for projects, whether they're in your office or not. And so that was something I really liked. And then that gives you the opportunity to just meet different types of people and have, a broader and more diverse working group. So I love that about the firm, and the opportunities to both travel, more and less depending on what's going on with my personal life. So those were some of the key features for me.
Right, Trish, do you want me to?
You can
I
wrap
know
it
we're
up.
at time, but
If you want to give a quick one, Gabe, and then I'll wrap it up.
yeah, I mean, I think just like the big thing for me, and it kind of echoing some of what Melissa said, is that like the people that I met at Carney, I recruited with a number of firms, like I'm sure many of you will when you're at business school. They all come on campus and talk to a lot of different people. You start to get a feel for, what the personalities like, the culture, and every firm is different, and every person has their own sort of fit. But I think Carney really stood out in that regard, and the people I spoke with. And then once I joined the firm, you never really know until you're in a company what it's like, but it rang true. And those personal connections, and that whether it's people in Berlin, in New York, in SF, like I've met a lot of cool people, Toronto, and it stayed close. And I think Carney's tight knit and just like culture of good people helping each other out was just resonated with me, and was a big difference.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you to all our panelists for joining tonight, and thank you all for joining. We hope you stay connected with us. There will be a series of webinars and newsletters that are coming out in the fall, so please be on the lookout and sign up for those through our website. I also just want to say, please follow our Instagram as well. So our recruiting team will be posting Thursday weekly stories and posts, just sharing a little bit about what's going on at Kearney, the culture, the summer program that we are holding, and just tips and tricks for the recruiting season. So that's a great way to stay informed about what's going on. But again, thank you so much for joining tonight. And we are looking forward to staying connected with you throughout the school year. And good luck.